These are the first set of survivors discharged from the hospital after a physical examination. Now they have to go through counseling and other psychosocial help. Horrific start to the Muslim holiday. About a dozen people have been confirmed dead, 24 people rescued since operations started the night before. As at the time of this report, 5 adult male, a 4-year-old boy, and 4 females are confirmed casualties. The state coordinator of the National Emergency Management Agency, Ibrahim Fariloye, says the rescue mission started as soon as they got the distress call at about 9:30 p.m. on Sunday.
Before we got there, the community had mobilized resources to respond. And when we got there, we shared information, and at the end, close to 23 were known to us. But this afternoon, when the DPO came with the medical hospital, he confirmed that it wasn't 23 but 24.
Several eyewitnesses say the residents knew the building was distressed but refused to honor a quit notice from the owners given months before.
It's still a live site here at the building collapsing in Ebute Metta area of Lagos, where emergency management officials are combing the rubble in their rescue operation. Already one too many and a familiar scene in the neighborhood. The Lagos State government says it will be pulling down some distressed structures.
While the excavation of the debris continues, about 200 meters away, another 3-story building showing structural defects and already marked as distressed is still occupied.
Come on, start telling them to move out immediately.
This building collapse is the second in Lagos in the last 2 months. In February this year, a 3-story building collapsed in Yaba area of Lagos, where at least 4 people were confirmed dead. Dari Ido, Channels Television News.
On the 1st of November last year, Lagos, a multi-story building came down in Lagos, and 42 people lost their lives in that particular incident in Ikoyi. And since then, there have been a few other building collapses in Lagos. This is the latest, which has happened at Ebute Metta. Now we understand that at least a dozen people have lost their lives. Thankfully, 24 people were successfully rescued from that particular building collapse. But there are questions as to how many more will happen before we decide that we'll eventually put an end to building collapse in our country, but particularly in Lagos State. This morning, we're joined by a structural engineer. Engineer Peter Igbinijesu is a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, also a fellow, Nigerian Institution of Structural Engineers, and president, Nigerian Institution of Structural Engineers, a division of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. You're welcome to Sunrise Early this morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I think what I find particularly disturbing in this particular story, because yes, given the, I think it was an 11 multi-story luxury set of flats we saw in Ikoyi, there was no sign. I heard that, you know, there was just a shaking of some sort, and then the building came down. The building caved because they were still building that particular one. This one was already earmarked for demolition, and the people already had notice that this building could, you know, come down. There was something, there was a defect on this particular building. Still, there was, you know, it was still occupied to the best of our knowledge until this particular collapse. So there are questions as to, you know, what are our own attitudes towards safety as a people?
That's a very good question. First and foremost, let me sympathize and commiserate with the families of those who lost their loved ones. And those who were injured, we wish them speedy recovery. It's a holistic problem in Nigeria. Because if people have been told to leave a structure that's showing serious signs of distress, and your own, you take unnecessary risks to continue living there, you have yourself to blame. And those who lost their lives now, so unfortunately, they've gone. May their souls rest in peace. I think the first issue will be that they don't have alternative. They don't know where to go to. And maybe apparently they've been used to living there. And it still comes down to the problem of enforcing to ensure that people obey laws. And for government agencies that are responsible for enforcing the quit notice, if they don't have enough manpower, they could engage the services of others to help them. And it also goes to the fact that being on the lookout for our neighbors. Those who watch people going and out of that building, they didn't even show that carefree attitude to them. But such, we should also be a brother's keeper. We can also act as enforcers to say, don't you see that this building has been earmarked for demolition? Why are you living there? You can engage them, you can confront them, so that we avoid issues like this. And I learned that there are some buildings within the same vicinity that are also earmarked, but people are living there. It's not enough to just say, hey, come out, come out. Once they see you have gone with your movement, your equipment, they come back. But those of us who live around such places, we can also help government to enforce all these quit notices. Yes.
Well, so there will always also be the suddenness, but we understand that this particular one was earmarked and had been earmarked for months.
Correct.
There are questions as to whether or not the landlord was still collecting rent. The landlord claims that he had stopped collecting rent in that particular building and had told the people to move out. While we're still verify that particular side of the story. But if it was earmarked for months, and, you know, people had a responsibility to go and pull it down, how long should a building authority or an agency give as latitude? Because I imagine that the reason why it's been earmarked for demolition is so as to save lives.
Correct.
It's to ensure that people do not die unnecessarily. And since we have identified that buildings are structurally weak, and we have earmarked them as such, how long should the notice be before, you know, the building authority, building control agency move in to pull those building downs to avoid this sort of situation?
There are procedures, because once notices are given, there's a maximum period given. But once that period of grace given has elapsed, it should be immediate. But as you rightly said, if it is proven that the landlord was still collecting rent, because that must have given encouragement for the people to continue living there, such should be investigated, because it's a criminal act. Because if government have told you that your structure, your building is distressed, is coming down, so, and you on your own, you have also given notices to your occupants. But if, among the survivors, that they were still paying rent, I think that landlord should be held culpable. So it's a big issue that we need to try as much as possible to nib on the ball, because enforcement is what is very, very key in this sense.
Wouldn't that be hunting for scapegoats? For instance, I mean, if a landlord was found to still be collecting rent, and you say, oh, okay, we'll hold him culpable. I'm not saying we shouldn't hold him culpable, but the people who earmarked it for demolition and didn't come to demolish on time, don't they have a higher culpability?
Of course they do. Government has, if as an agent you were supposed to bring that building down, there may be a lot of reasons why it has not been able, the government, the people responsible in government have not gone to put those buildings down. But we cannot say, but the law says that once that period you gave has elapsed, it should come down immediately. It should come down. So there's no excuse of extending on the rest, but it's not good for us to start speculating, because it's only God who knows what has happened.
We certainly can investigate.
Of course.
The questions can be raised and we can investigate.
Because luckily for us, there are a lot of survivors. We can ask questions and we'll get to the root of it.
Well, we saw also that, you know, nearby buildings have been earmarked immediately. That happened. You know, there was some confusion when the building control and also, I think, the emergency agencies asked them to evacuate immediately. I think we heard the wailing there and the crying when they were asking people to evacuate. So there are questions as to really alternatives. Because in Lagos, we know that housing is a big deal.
Correct.
It's a super big deal. So there are questions as to, a lot of these houses are old. They're in areas where, you know, they usually suffer a waterlogging problem. Maybe the foundations were not properly done. There are questions as to whether soil testing was done for those areas. Do you think that there should be special consideration? And this is, you know, doing the enforcement with a human face, knowing just how old those buildings are and the fact that, you know, people have been there for many years, whether there should be alternatives provided even as government seeks to ensure that more people are safe and, you know, this kind of incidences are brought to barest minimum.
Government should be seen to be responsible to its citizens. And in cases like this, there will be nothing wrong if there are alternatives. Because if you ask people to evacuate immediately, as just the case you pointed out for the surrounding buildings, where do they go to? And that may be responsible to the wailing you were hearing at the background. Where do they go to? So if there are alternatives, no matter how long, maybe temporary measures, people will gladly move before they find their feet in another location. But when you look at the whole issue of buildings, there are three major areas that are involved: the design stage, the construction stage, and the usage. In our case now, the one we are discussing now on the Ebute Metta is the usage. It is true that most of those structures have been standing for years. And the usage of those buildings may have exceeded what was originally designed for, in the sense that you are now giving additional loads that are now bringing various stresses on these buildings, even including the foundation. You understand? Because these buildings are subjected to vertical loads and horizontal loads. Who knows? These buildings, maybe they were designed for residential purposes. Maybe somewhere along the line, there may be some rooms that are being converted to other usage. In other words, you are putting additional load to what the foundation can stand. So there are a lot of reasons that can be responsible for the collapse. And the good thing about it is that they showed signs of distress, which was warning. Unlike the one you referred to in your introductory remarks, the Ikoyi, the Ajera Road, it was still under construction. You understand? So not unlike this case where you see the danger on your own, you are trying as much as possible to go and face the danger, but it was very risky. So we just plead that government should have the will, and as it is now, provide alternative, and as a temporary measure, then quickly relocate the people.
Let's pivot to Lagos now. Coyote.
Right. Thank you very much, Mokbe. So I'd just like to quickly get clarification on the point about demolition, because I know it's quite expensive, I imagine, getting the equipment on scene, ensuring that safety is ensured, and having the manpower as well. So who's meant to bear the cost of demolition? Because I think that has also been an issue. Is it the government, the developer, landlord, or who exactly is responsible for demolition?
Thank you very much. In this case, it is obvious that it's going to be government, because the cost involved in it is only government that can bear it. Because as far as the developer is concerned, if it was a building under construction, it will still be the responsibility of the developer. But in the case of the Ebute Metta collapse, where it has long been completed, it has been there for years, the landlord was told to say that this building is coming down, and the landlord in turn has also told his occupants to leave. In this case, it's the responsibility of government to bring down this structure.
Okay, I imagine if that's also responsible for why it's sometimes slow to see this happen. I don't know. Is it too expensive for government to undertake? Is it? I don't know if you have an idea as to how much it costs to demolish a building. Is it too much? Because I imagine there'll be a lot of structures that need to be demolished. Is that something government can undertake?
Of course, government can undertake because it's just to earmark resources for it. It depends on the type of structure that is supposed to be demolished. In the case of the Ebute Metta, the maximum there is about 2, 3, 4 floors. But when you now talk of high-rise structures exceeding this number of floors, there are different methods these buildings can be brought down. And not to forget, in demolishing these structures, those that have been withstanding stresses within the same vicinity, you have to ensure that you do not put too much impact that will also affect the existing structures. So that is why we said responsibilities like this should be in the hands of government. And if government doesn't have the capacity, they can engage the services of experts. And this is where the professional bodies come in. And the government can be advised on how to bring these structures down without affecting the surrounding buildings, because that is the caveat, because you are not bringing down a distressed building and at the same time causing more danger to already existing buildings within the same vicinity. So these are the things we have to look into. But I still say that government is capable and can really bring out these distressed buildings on their own.
And I think it's very interesting and instructive. When we began this conversation, you said it's a holistic challenge. It's multifaceted. There's, on the one hand, the cost of renting apartments in Lagos, which hopefully we're going to talk about. But I know that the question on the minds of a lot of people in that area, and even other areas, will be, which building is next? We've seen a building that at least has been earmarked. There's an X sign on it. But there are some without that X mark, but clearly have distress signals or don't have it, I mean, clearly, but it is inherent. So how can we assure that yes, there are some that we know have distress, signals and all of that, but how can we ensure that our building, the building we stay in, that we do business in, has the integrity to withstand all of the pressure and all of the activities that go on in it? Is there a way to go around that?
Yes, ab initio, when a structure is going to be erected, there are basic things that when you engage the services of the structural engineer, he will look into. First and foremost, you as the owner of the building, what is the purpose of this building? Is it purely residential? Is it purely commercial? Because you need to provide this information so that the structural engineer who is going to design the structure, because his aim is to guarantee the stability of your building to withstand all forces. So once he gets these parameters, he does his analysis, he does his designs, he makes provisions, and get a competent builder, and the building is erected. Over the years, there should be what we develop, culture of maintenance. Occasionally, you go back to that building and see that everything that has been constructed are still in place. And as I said earlier on, also monitor the usage of that building. We have seen in cases in this country whereby you design a residential building, maybe bedroom, where the children will sleep. You'll be surprised. Children will dance disco in that bedroom. You'll be surprised. Close to the corner of the master bedroom, they have created a library, a bookshelf. These are completely different laws that were not taken into consideration when that structure was being designed. So what we always advise is ensure that you stick to your primary aim of the usage of that building. But if peradventure you need to change the usage, you can also go back to your professionals that did the building for you so that they advise you the implication. And they can also give advice on additional supports or strength you need to put. Because by the time you just finish your structure, you give them to tenants, and you tell them it's a 2-bedroom flat, it's a 3-bedroom flat, but you are not there regularly to monitor what the tenant does. And you'll be surprised, the tenant will have taken one of the bedroom and changed it to something else. And if the load he has introduced in that area was not taken into consideration, you are bringing gradual stresses on that building. And with time, they become, they will be manifested. But to ask your question that for a new building that does not show signs of stress, all you have to do is to ensure that tell your tenants, this is the purpose of this building. Try as much as possible to limit yourself. But if in peradventure you need to change, let such changes be brought to the notice of the owner of the building, who in turn will now consult the professionals he has used in erecting those buildings. So all of us are involved in it. We are all involved in it. So we should try as much as possible the beginning. Yeah.
Let me ask you this
from the beginning,
question.
We have it perfectly.
Yeah. Well, there was something that you said earlier about a building that's been on ground for many years, and all of a sudden it looks the way the one that the government is talking about evacuating people from is looking. Do buildings have expiration dates?
Of course they do. They do. When a building is completed and certified, ready for occupation, it should be nothing less than 50, and for residential. And this depends on the regular maintenance you carry out. When we say maintenance, it's not just painting the surfaces. You should check the services, the utilities, the fixtures, and, as I said, the usage of that structure. So buildings have lifespan, but when we do design, we normally give 99 years, but a building should stand for as many years as possible, but with constant maintenance. And when we do this, it can be on a periodical basis of nothing less than 5 years. Every 5 years, visit that structures. And there's a time now where in this country, we advise government, we advise property owners, we advise private individuals that wherever you have your structure, because of what is happening in this country, try and engage the right professionals so that they can carry out structural integrity assessment of your building from time for every 5 years.
Yeah. At a time when many people are talking about a dearth of good residential places to live all over the country, just as you said, it's a national phenomenon. Are there questions that people can ask about the lifespan of the house that they are going to take to live in, and are they even ever going to get the right answers?
As a potential tenant, the right is on you to ask. You can really ask, because if it's a new building, you will know. But if it's a building that was already being used, you can ask, how long has this building? And you can even go to the relevant government agency responsible for approving, and they can give you information concerning that property, when it was approved, when the construction started, when it was completed, when it was certified. Because as a regulatory agency, government is supposed to give certification for every building that is completed, and that date will be known. So as a potential tenant for any property you want to rent, you are allowed to ask questions on how long that building has been standing, and go further. What was the purpose of that? What purpose was that building used for by the former tenant? Also ask. So it's there. The law provides for that.
Okay, well, I've learned something new today. Certification. I never knew that you could ask for the certification
Of course.
of any building that you're about to, move into. But that's something
For
new.
a regulatory body, is there when they are giving you approval to start building. They also tell you that you have to obtain approval when you complete your building. So you need that certificate too.
That is interesting.
Yes.
What I would like to know is whether this gospel, which engineers have now been preaching in the wake of building collapse, if it's been, if it's been imbibed, are you seeing more and more people who are building being conscious of engaging the services of the experts?
As a professional body, for we in the Nigerian Institute of Structural Engineers, we have not seen any change. We have not, because apart from government agencies, ministries, departments, and agencies that engage professionals, most individuals,
yes,
they still rely on these, how will I put it? Foremen and on the rest. And the question they always say is that it's expensive for them to engage the services of professionals. But we advise them that, look, if you want to have full benefit of the property you want to develop, it's better to do it properly from the onset rather than do it and you lose all your investment. So get the services of professionals who will advise you on all parameters so that by the time this building is being constructed, because the design will have been perfected, you can go to sleep. And by the time the building is being put to use, for the primary purpose it was designed for, you can still also go to sleep and start getting returns on your investment.
Well, that's a fine place to leave it. I'm sure that our people are listening to the gospel. Our viewers this morning, I've learned a thing or two. Thank you so much for coming to share your body of knowledge. Engineer Peter Igbinijesu is a fellow of Nigerian Society of Engineers, fellow Nigerian Institution of Structural Engineers, and also the president of the National Nigerian Institution of Structural Engineers, which is a division of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Today this morning.
Thanks for having me.